Hey, good afternoon, Jamf Nation. My name is Tijsje Flair and I will be the host for this session. I hope you enjoyed the first round of sessions you had earlier on, and also the break, and maybe you even got yourself some popcorn. I would like you to welcome to the session where you are going to learn from the industry experts around vulnerability management for Apple devices, which is definitely a hot topic. But first, a housekeeping rule. This year we introduced Q&A through the JNUC 2023 app under the session Q&A section. So if you would like to ask any questions, make sure to drop them into the app, so we will cover them after the session. And that goes for the virtual attendees as well. Well, now we have covered that. Let's actually go over to the session. All the way from the United Kingdom and the Czech Republic, I would like to introduce on the stage Milind and Thomas, and please give them a warm welcome.
Hey everyone, I hope everyone's having a great start to JNUC so far. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about tackling vulnerability management for your Apple devices. My name is Milind Patel. I help lead our endpoint security product teams here at Jamf.
My name is Thomas, and I'm part of the Jamf Protect product team.
Cool. So the first item on today's agenda is understanding vulnerabilities. In this section, we'll dive deep into what vulnerabilities mean and how they affect your security posture. This is crucial in helping us to identify and prevent potential threats that could endanger our security, as well as user privacy while using Apple devices. We'll then look into the security landscape and how Apple devices specifically are affected. Even though these devices do come with very robust security features, they're not completely immune from threats, especially as they become more and more prominent and lucrative targets for attackers. Once we have a better understanding of CVEs, we'll review how you can craft a strategy and a plan of action. Cyberspace is always evolving. Threats are evolving on a constant daily basis, while old ones evolve and pose us new challenges. So we need to proactively devise a plan to tackle these threats and try to reduce any potential attack surface. Lastly, we'll help discuss how Jamf can help in vulnerability management efforts. We'll illustrate how you can use the Jamf platform in order to effectively execute on this particular strategy and enhance the overall security of your Apple devices. So let's get started with understanding what vulnerabilities are and how they affect our devices. So what is a vulnerability? Vulnerabilities are essentially weaknesses in software or systems. Think of it like a loophole that can be manipulated by cyber attackers. You'll often hear of vulnerabilities hand in hand with exploits. An exploit can be seen as the method that attackers are using in order to take advantage of or exploit certain vulnerabilities. It's the act of sneaking through and leveraging the particular loophole. Essentially, a vulnerability can be seen as the unlocked door, whilst the exploit is the act of intruding through that door and compromising that system's security. These vulnerabilities can really affect any part of your applications or systems that you might be using, especially where an endpoint may be running a large number of applications or services, like mobile devices or Mac devices. macOS is renowned for its robust security. However, like I said, vulnerabilities can still occur. An attacker can then exploit these vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access or install malicious software, putting our data at risk. Apps like WhatsApp, which can be used globally and are very ubiquitous, can have vulnerabilities that pose a risk to our privacy and security. Exploits can reveal personal information about particular users or allow unauthorized access and control of the app mechanics, as well as access to the app data. These vulnerabilities don't signify a very specific threat as such, but they do represent a risk, a potential gateway for attackers to compromise our security. Understanding this risk helps us to strategize and make sure that our cybersecurity plans are robust enough and we're able to protect ourselves more optimally. So let's segue into the next point of discussion, understanding CVEs. CVE is an acronym for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. So this is an industry standard for identifying and naming cybersecurity vulnerabilities. It's effectively a catalog, which is globally recognized and provides definitions for publicly disclosed vulnerabilities and exposures. Each CVE entry gets a specific identifier, making it very easy to track that specific vulnerability across different tools and systems that you might be using today. Sometimes, software vendors will proactively disclose details about a specific CVE, even before they make it to any CVE database. This preemptive transparency from software vendors can illustrate great commitment to end-user transparency, to end-user security, and allows us to take preventative measures in advance of any potential new threats that could be leveraging these vulnerabilities with exploits. So what does an identifier look like? As we can see, the very first part is fixed, simply referencing the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures system itself by denoting CVE. The next part is the 4-digit year that the vulnerability was first discovered or made public. And finally, we have the unique identifier. Again, this unique identifier is consistent across various different security tools that you might be using because it's referencing a very specific vulnerability. So it makes it much easier to then track that vulnerability across different systems. So now that we have a baseline understanding of what CVEs are and how they're identified, let's explore what they mean for our Apple devices. While we're overall seeing quite a reduction in Apple product vulnerabilities since 2021, there's evidence that these vulnerabilities are being exploited out in the wild, both with zero-day vulnerabilities as well as known ones. A zero-day vulnerability is simply one that's undiscovered and hence doesn't really have a patch for that yet. The key message here on this slide is simple. Whilst these vulnerabilities exist, they've become known and they are not addressed. It's very cheap and easy for malicious actors to leverage these vulnerabilities in order to compromise systems. You don't need to spend a lot of resources trying to look for undiscovered exploits and undiscovered vulnerabilities when known ones exist and are able to be exploited. Therefore, one of the best ways that we can protect ourselves is always by ensuring that we're regularly patching our softwares, whether that's your operating systems or applications, especially if we can expedite patching as a result of a specific vulnerability being discovered. So in these endeavors, Apple continues to provide us with great tools. One such example is rapid security response that we should try to leverage. Rapid security response is important both for macOS and iOS devices alike, where we're seeing a great number of vulnerabilities coming through. This helps to make sure that important security improvements are able to be delivered to the device in between major software updates. For example, improvements to the Safari browser, the WebKit framework, or any other critical system libraries. They may also be used to mitigate some security issues much more quickly. So if a vulnerability has been discovered, it makes it much easier to have that patch available and delivered to devices. Another great example is lockdown mode. Lockdown mode helps protect devices against extremely rare and highly sophisticated pieces of cyber attacks. It does this by limiting certain device functions. So sometimes it's very user-led and not great for the end-user experience, but it does provide a highly effective form of mitigating against advanced cyber attacks. And overall, just reducing the attack surface because it's limiting those device functions. So we know we need to be more proactive in this particular area, but where do we start? Vulnerability management is a complex area. Right? Organizations need a good, actionable plan in order to deal with the risks arising from software vulnerabilities. First of all, we need to make sure that we are identifying our right stakeholders that are involved in this particular plan. We're identifying all of the resources that we have available. And we want to make sure that we're preparing guidelines before embarking on this particular endeavor by making sure that we're creating those guidelines, we're defining certain metrics that we want to be able to follow. And these can either be based on your internal policies, or they can be following some common industry benchmark. We need to make sure that we're identifying all of the different devices that we have, and that we have good visibility onto those devices where vulnerability scans are taking place. Once we have that visibility, we need to make sure that that visibility results in good reporting and an ability to be able to prioritize the results of those scans. So once all of those CVE detections are coming in, you need to have a way where you can prioritize the most critical CVEs or the most impactful ones. Finally, dealing with the risks. Here, we want to really make sure that we're proactively patching our systems, but also, like I said before, delivering expedited patches where a certain flaw has been discovered. So where can Jamf help you today? There's 3 specific areas that Jamf helps customers in managing and securing their devices. Many of you will be familiar with these 3 different products. With Jamf Protect, we're able to get visibility onto device risks, including vulnerabilities. Jamf Protect is also able to generate certain risk signals, including those vulnerabilities, where you can take those risk signals and connect them with Jamf Connect, or any of our partners for implementation of conditional access. With Jamf Pro, we're able to carry out remediation workflows. That's through making sure that our operating systems and our applications are being patched and regularly updated in order to mitigate or remediate certain risk. And as I alluded to earlier, by having these signals going to Jamf Connect, we can make sure that we are able to limit access to any sensitive corporate resources if that device is found to be vulnerable. So here, that is a potential kind of sensitive topic when it comes to end user experience. We want to make sure that we are proactively taking care of device security and organizational data, but we want to also make sure that end users aren't interrupted too much. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit.
So let us have a detailed view on how you can leverage Jamf in crafting an actionable plan towards successful vulnerability management. One of the first steps is to deploy a tooling for CVE detections. Obviously, the best is to have an automated and frequent scans in place. This requires less IT team resources from your side, and you will also get much quicker reaction times on whatever is detected. Jamf Pro, in combination with Jamf Protect, delivers this automation. To get this up and rolling, you need to enroll all your Apple devices into Jamf Protect as a first step. And then you need to connect Jamf Protect with Jamf Pro using UEM integration. So let us have a look how this can be done, actually. So assuming that you have all devices enrolled in Jamf Pro, there are two simple steps needed to enroll them into Jamf Protect. The first is to create an activation profile in Jamf Protect with security capability enabled. At the end, you will download the configuration profile XML payload. You can also download a configuration for Jamf Trust application. But if you prefer to go without additional agent on your devices, you can skip this step. The second step is to create a configuration profile in Jamf Pro using the downloaded XML payload. Once this is created, you will scope that profile according to your needs. So now, after those two steps, devices are enrolled into Jamf Protect. The last step is to connect Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro instance using UEM integration. So you go into Jamf Protect to the UEM Connect and create the UEM integration with your Jamf Pro instance by using the URL of the instance and credential for configuration and integration. Once this is done and running, Jamf Protect will start automatically downloading the software inventory for each of your device and will also run scans over all this software and the versions and will cross-check it with the NVD NIST CVE catalog. With these automated scans, you can detect any newly published CVE in any of your device software within 2 hours. You just need to make sure that all your devices are enrolled and online. Okay, so CVE detections are in place. How do I know what has been detected? For that, you will use the vulnerability management dashboard in Jamf Protect to understand your device fleet security risks. So this is the vulnerability dashboard. It contains 2 main parts. On the top, there are 2 widgets. One of them is vulnerability distribution, which is a security manager-oriented widget that it basically indicates the current state. It shows device counts per severity. The device severity corresponds to the most severe CVE detected on that device. The widget also shows the average device severity score over all your devices. This is the number in the middle of the circle. It's a number that's ranging from 0 to 10, and IT admins should aim at having 0 average severity score, which means no vulnerable device. But actually, this is hard to achieve in practice. The second widget, vulnerable devices, is also a security manager-oriented widget showing trend. Vulnerable device counts over time. It indicates whether our security posture has improved or vice versa. The line indicates new detections, remediations, and other anomalies. The example on the screen basically shows that there was a stale state until approximately 2nd of August. At that time, there were new CVE detections in the currently installed operating system versions. Those CVEs were actually fixed in the operating system, like macOS version 13.5 and iOS 16.6. And the decline on the line indicates user-initiated updates. The other part of the dashboard basically shows more detailed information. There are two different views. Devices basically is an IT admin-oriented view showing each device detail and their vulnerability state. On the table, it shows the max severity of the device, every CVEs score, and other figures. An IT admin might want to drill down to see more details per each device. The detail of the device shows, for example, date of the most recent scan, and also it shows a list of CVEs that were actually detected on that specific device. Or it also shows a list of software that has been scanned and is installed on the device, and any vulnerability has been found or detected on that software. The main use of it is for IT admin to prioritize any remediation steps. Another view is focused on CVEs. This is basically a list of CVEs detected in each device in your device fleet. It's also an IT admin-oriented view, and it shows for each CVE its severity and availability of an exploit code and some other information. An IT admin can also dig deeper to see more details per each CVE, such as like what devices are affected by that CVE or what software is affected by it. One of the possible use cases for this view is, imagine that you are sitting in your office, you do your usual stuff, and suddenly you learn about a new critical CVE, for example, using Jamf block or in the news. And you are just wondering whether your devices or whether there is any device in your device fleet affected by that specific CVE. So you just copy and paste the CVE ID, go to the vulnerability view on this dashboard, and try to search for that CVE. If there is a record actually found in the view, it means that there are some devices affected by that CVE. So you just click, and you will see a list of devices that are affected. And based on that, you can plan any remediation steps you need. Okay, so we have new CVE detection tools up and running. The dashboard shows a lot of vulnerable devices. Your IT resources are limited. Time is running, and we need to prioritize the remediations. So first thing that needs to be done is to assess the CVE, to understand all the CVEs that has been detected in the device fleet. The vulnerability management report and its detailed views with sorting, filtering capabilities will help you to navigate. With this, you can quickly show the top 5 most critical CVEs or devices, for example. You might have different strategies for prioritization. For example, you might want to focus on most severe CVEs impacting most devices. Or you might want to focus on CVEs with an exploit code available, which should be treated as more risky. We also aware that even low severity CVEs, when they are changed together, can pose a big risk to your environment. On the other hand, there might be some critical CVEs that actually have lower impact because of your environment configuration. So now we are at the phase where we need a plan to tackle down the full backlog of vulnerabilities that were detected and prioritized. For creating and crafting the plan, you will need to take organization business goals, your capacities, and your risk tolerance into account. You will also need to assess importance of the affected devices, considering organizational data and services they are accessing. For example, a finance department where the devices can access physical, financial, or other company-sensitive data might need to be fixed as soon as possible. You might also have compliance requirements that you need to meet. Or you might just want to try and find a CVE that affects most of your devices and easy to fix, such as just updating one single application on all your devices. Here is an example where we use the vulnerability management repo to find out if we meet a specific compliance requirement. The requirement is to patch the software within 14 days of an update being released if the patch actually fixes a critical CVE with an exploit code available. We can use the vulnerabilities view to list all such CVEs that meet those requirements. And if we will dig deeper, we might quickly realize that just updating 4 different applications in the entire device fleet will actually fix the CVEs and we will meet the compliance requirements. Now is the time to put the plan into action. So one of the risk response is actually trying to avoid the risk by ensuring that all software is always up to date. You can use Jamf Pro configuration profiles to enforce automated operating system and application updates. You can also leverage Jamf Pro app installers feature to deploy applications and ensure that they are updated automatically. This strategy, however, might not be always possible. For example, you need to test all the newest application versions before they are actually deployed on your production devices. So what other options do we have? Instead, we can focus on fixing the vulnerabilities by updating the affected software as soon as the new critical CVEs are detected. If we will be able to use an automated or semi-automated workflow for remediations, we will get faster response times and lower IT resources that are required for patching. For that, we will use Jamf Protect and its UEM signaling feature to execute remediation workflows in Jamf Pro. This is actually achieved through an extension attributes that are set automatically by Jamf Protect whenever a critical CVE is detected on a device. The very same attributes are then unset whenever Jamf Protect detects that the device has been patched. So the following example shows how the UEM signaling can be used for easy and controlled operating system patching workflow. In Jamf Protect, just configure UEM signaling by assigning an extension attribute to the vulnerable OS threat category. So here in this list, there is a vulnerable OS threat category, and from the list, just assign previously created an extension attribute. You might also want to enable admin notifications, so you know when there is a time to execute the manual workflow. The next step is to go into Jamf Pro. Now, whenever a critical CVE is detected, the extension attribute will be set on all affected devices in Jamf Pro automatically. In Jamf Pro, you just go create a smart group and use the very same extension attribute as a criteria. Any devices with a critical vulnerability will automatically become part of this group. Then use software update feature in Jamf Pro to enforce update of all devices that are part of this group. You might want to repeat this process as needed. Apart from enforcing software updates on end-user devices, we can also rely actually on the end user updating the software. But we will need to focus on educating the end user by delivering good messaging and great user experience. We will need to craft a good user's notifications and use Jamf Protect to automate its delivery. We can also rely on Jamf Trust applications so that users are notified via push notifications whenever a critical CVE has been detected on their device. Configuring Jamf Protect for notifications delivery is quite easy. In the very same threat response policy, the vulnerable OS has to be set so that it triggers user push notifications. In some other part of Jamf Protect, we can use notification settings for crafting the good message for the user. When a push notification arrives, the user can click to see detailed information. The user then, on the detailed information, they will see like what's the problem, why is it important to fix it as soon as possible, and actually how to resolve the problem by going into Update Center and, for example, in this case, update the operating system. There is also a third strategy to use as a response. It's called mitigation strategy, and it's used whenever there is actually maybe no patch available for that software, or patching is just too slow, and the vulnerability is so critical that you cannot have it for a long time in your environment. It's basically about introducing a workflow where users can access critical corporate application and data whenever a critical CVE is detected on their device. Actually, Jamf Protect, Jamf Connect, and Zero Trust Access helps in delivering this type of remediation strategy. The workflow can be fully automated or triggered manually whenever needed. There is actually a lot of flexibility in the terms of configuration. So let's see how it can be done. We start by defining all the critical applications in Zero Trust Access policy. For each application, we use the risk-based access policy section to enable automated blocks when a device risk turns high. The example shows how to ensure that users of critical vulnerable device won't be able to access our company's Salesforce until their device is patched. As a next step, we will again go into the threat response policy, and we will make sure that the device risk is set to high whenever a critical CVE is detected on the operating system. The users are then notified whenever this happens, so they know why they are blocked when accessing Salesforce and how to resolve the problem. You can then keep this configuration in place to automate the entire process at all times, or turn it back off after the devices are patched. Okay, so putting it all together, what we have learned. So for CVE prioritization and visibility, we have the Jamf Protect's vulnerability dashboard that helps us to understand what CVEs has been detected on our devices and where the biggest risk is. We will then use UEM signaling tool and Jamf Pro, which helps us with remediation and the automation of those workflows. And as a last resource, we can use Zero Trust Network Access, which helps us to protect our data and services.
So by now, all of you have heard about trusted access. Vulnerability management is actually a great example of how you can leverage all of these different pieces of the Jamf platform in order to get to a particular trusted access outcome. What that means for us is that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant, meaning that any of these devices are free from any critical vulnerabilities, can access your sensitive data. Finally, we can't understate the importance of collaboration between different software vendors, security researchers, and the security community as a whole in order to have all of us resolve these vulnerabilities more effectively. Even if you don't use a Jamf MDM or security product today, Jamf Threat Labs team is constantly providing new research and publishing that, including vulnerabilities that they themselves are discovering on Mac and iOS operating systems. So you can freely check them out on our blog. They're publishing new stuff all the time. And I think that's it for us today. Thank you so much for attending and listening to us. If you'd like to dig into any of the details from what we've talked about, we have a brain date at 4 p.m. So you can find Tomasz and I at the Brain Date Lounge. Alternatively, if you can't make that, there's one at 10 a.m. tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas and Milind. We actually do have some questions in the app, so if that's okay, I'll drop them here. Actually, a couple of them have been upvoted as well. So the first question, is vulnerability reporting for software type agnostic? Are alternative bundle types on file system considered when collecting vulnerability data? As an example, jar files, tarball, or more specifically, non-native binaries?
It's a good question. Today, we have support for basic binaries and installed applications, but as we move forward, we want to increase that coverage to include all different types of software that could be installed on that particular device. And even if it exists within that particular device but isn't installed officially, we want to be able to capture that and provide that in the reporting.
Cool, perfect. Second question, is there any support for regex or hash-based app vulnerability reporting? The use case in this case is being users often duplicating or renaming apps to keep or maintain multiple versions within their application's directory.
Currently, there is no support for this kind of scanning, but this is a great example of a use case, so it might be added in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of point of feedback. I think at its surface level, potentially, it wouldn't be an issue because we're looking at more than just the app name in order to carry out these detections. But yeah, I think that's a great point that we'll kind of continue to dig into, and as we make improvements, ensure that if there's any sort of tampering going on with applications, that we're able to continue to recognize that application and recognize the relevant CVEs.
Yeah, we are also thinking about implementing some kind of machine learning model for detecting those applications.
Awesome. Last question before we wrap it up and give them a warm applause. How is exploitability scored? Is this a generalized score or based on our specific configuration?
Well, it's actually based on the score that is given by the NVD-NIST database. So the score number is taken from the database, including the information about whether there is an exploit code available or no. So we are taking into account this external database. And we're also leveraging our internal Jamf Threat Labs team, who can actually do curation of the either the CVEs detected or taken from this NVD-NIST database or any new CVEs that might not be even published yet.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I mentioned earlier that sometimes the Jamf Threat Labs team is finding vulnerabilities. So obviously they're put into the system as soon as possible, even before they make its way to the database. So that's why we have to rely on the Jamf Threat Labs team to help us kind of gauge the rough sort of severity of that particular CVE. I think in general, though, a good thought here is that as we consider things like exploitability and severity and scoring, it's important to make sure that we're leveraging industry standards. Otherwise, you have different products, recognizing different things and ranking and rating things in different manners. So as you try to bring together your different tools and actually try to implement a vulnerability management program, it becomes harder and harder. So that's where relying on an industry standard like NIST or the CVSS score is really important.
Cool. And then maybe last question from my side. I can imagine after following this session and it starts to sink in, you maybe have more questions or want to learn more. How can they reach one of you to get, well, additional information or questions answered?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the Brain session, which is right after that session, so it will be one possible way how to meet us. And we will be around, so I think that we can just chat on the hallway.
Cool. Yeah, so just as a reminder, 4 p.m. today within the Brain Date Lounge. I think we were almost at max capacity, but I'm sure if people want to turn up and just find us, we can just have a group together where we can discuss things in more detail. There's one at 10 a.m. tomorrow as well. Alternatively, our names. We work at Jamf, so you know what the email address would be. For me, milind.patel@jamf.com, if you're wanting to get in touch.
Cool. Well, give them a warm, sunny applause. Thanks, Thomas and Milind.
Thank you. Thank you.